My name's Steve Manzanero, and on the call we have Vincent from Seagate. Vincent, really pleased that you could make it today. Obviously, from a pre-sales perspective, it's always nice to get a salesperson's view on what we're actually doing. But before we kick off and go through these questions, let me ask, what is it you do at Seagate?
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Stephen. So I'm heading the team, what we call the solutions team at Seagate in Europe. And solutions for Seagate means all the products that are not single unit hard drives, so data storage systems, as well as our live cloud and live mobile products, which are basically cloud object storage or data transfer services.
Right. And so that means that your team across the whole of EMEA effectively has the capability to actually architect solutions, work directly with the customers, and you're not constrained in the normal sort of storage piece. You can actually work with third parties, hence the reason why obviously euroNAS is here today.
Yeah, that is right. So we work with our channel. So our channel partners, our distributors, our system integrators, our managed service providers, but definitely also with software vendors like euroNAS. So absolutely, we work throughout the channel and also have a lot of contact with the end user itself.
Oh, that's brilliant. So you're not the faceless tier one that sits in. You guys roll their sleeves up, their hands on, they're really getting in and doing their things. That's really, and that's nice. It's a nice blend of being able to bring your technology and architect a solution, would you say, with your channel partners or distribution that may enable advanced services across it. And it's interesting, and hopefully we'll touch on the cloud elements of it a bit later as we go through our own questions. I promise this is not going to be too long. It's going to be a simple one. We're looking forward to it. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to kick off. So look, from a euroNAS perspective, we're starting to see our customers and our customers, the Seagate customers as well. We're starting to see organizations place a greater emphasis on things like scalable architectures, bringing that operational control back into the HQ, and also looking for really high storage densities. So from Seagate's perspective, what do you think is driving this shift? And to add to that, you've got some brilliant announcements, and we look at something like the new Exos 4U74 and your enterprise JBODs. How is that from your perspective actually driving our customer base and who are looking for this type of control, these densities?
Yeah. No, thank you. I can clearly tell you have done your homework, so that's great to hear. So what is driving the data, the need for data storage, right? And mainly focuses on data growth, so the data creation and also the need to store data. That is a key driver, as well as the need for reducing data center footprint. How can we get more capacity in the rack, while ideally also lowering the power that is used per terabyte. So these three aspects are really driving the what we see as the changes right now in the market.
Yeah.
Higher capacity JBODs, the 4U74 is a very good example, facilitating that need in the market.
And that's really interesting, as we see, especially, and I'll talk from a UK perspective, as we drive to that net zero, we're seeing that capacity. Look, let's face it, capacity never goes down; it always goes up, and the archive piece, and we will touch on that. But we are definitely seeing a drive within our data centers to actually start to lower the footprint of power, carbon emissions, and that drive to net zero. It's a really interesting piece. Now, I'm an engineer, as you know, so I'm a pre-sales engineer. I genuinely am really excited about your heat-assisted magnetic recording, or HAMR, as I like to call it, or HAMR. It's amazing technology. Look, it is a genuinely amazing technology when we start to look at the way the actual disk platters are working. And my career goes back quite some time. Now, I was looking at this, and it's 20 years in the making. It's a very bold step by Seagate to actually change the laws of physics when it comes to actually the drive. It's a very clear path. There's a clear path up to over 100 terabytes on a singular drive, which to me is frightening. It's a frightening amount that goes on. This is a significant step on our move forward. And from an engineering perspective, what a breakthrough. How do you think this technology, and when you speak to your customers, how is this technology, this roadmap, and getting the buy-in from your, from everything from a hyperscaler down to a sort of enterprise or mid-enterprise type customers? How do you think this infrastructure will start to actually drive their thinking and their roadmap for the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it is addressing exactly the needs that we just spoke about. How do I achieve high capacity points with the same type of footprint? We announced our 44 terabyte drive this month.
Correct.
in March, so that's very recent. I think that's a perfect example of how we are growing the capacity using that HAMR technology. So we started with Mosaic 3 Plus, which is the platform that is supporting 30 plus terabyte per drive about a year and a half ago, and now we are at Mosaic 4 Plus, so this is the 40 terabytes and up capacity points. So again, with this technology, we are able to get more capacity into a drive. So we're not adding platters in the drive. We are working with the 10 platters that are in the hard drive. So we are able to store more data on a single platter. And that is exactly what the HAMR technology is about. And to your point, it started around 20 years ago. So this is technology that has been worked on for many, many years. And right now, exactly when everything comes together, the market is asking for more capacity, definitely driven also by AI and for AI workloads, and also to find locations where you can store all your data rather than possibly removing data to make space for new data. Typically, enterprises are keeping everything they have and that they create, and they're creating large data repositories to run AI workloads at a later stage. So yeah, this technology is well aligned with what the market is asking for right now: high capacity points, lower power consumption per terabyte, and of course a smaller footprint in the rack. So I mentioned it before, I know, but this is exactly what it does. Yeah.
And that's a real interest. It's an interesting way. And again, the explosion or the battle for the LLMs, as I like to call it, you see these large, huge, great big companies, trying to ingest and feed data in. The growing tier, though, is the archive tier, and that's something that we're seeing on a regular basis. And being able to have that level of capacity in that smaller footprint with so much less power, and having a unified architecture that sits over the top that you can flexibly build out, someone like your euroNAS, for instance, I've got plug-in the company here, actually makes total sense, which kind of leads me on to the next question, right? From a euroNAS perspective, we're starting to see a move in our customer base. We're seeing two very distinct moves. One of them is cloud optimization, and I'm going to talk about that a bit later. The other one is a move away from a traditional fixed systems, and we're starting to see open infrastructure happening. By that, I mean, we're seeing lots of hardware constraints. So we're seeing people using their traditional x86 platforms that have lots of life left in them, and being able to load their capacity. Now, we've already talked about that. I think this is the game changer. Your 4U74 from an engineering perspective for me is a game changer. End of story. Those high capacity drives, smaller, denser capabilities that sit on. Now, just from your feedback, so what you're seeing in the market, I'm going to ask you a question, and sorry, it's a bit of an open one here, but we as you know, we've got a Ceph-based system, very simple. The idea of our systems are very simple to drive. Now, our feedback is we're seeing from our customer base is that they're looking towards a simplistic system that we can take an enterprise level JBOD, for instance, or an intelligent thing like the 4U74, plug those in and actually grow the nodes like Ceph systems. Are you seeing, with this AI technology, with everything that's kind of coming, are you seeing customers moving to a more simplistic approach to the way they do their architecture and trying to get away from traditional vendor locking? I'm not putting you in a position to say, because vendors definitely have their places, the Pures, the HP, the Dells, and looking at looking at AI workloads. But are you starting to see that look for where the customers are putting their hand up and saying, listen, I just need 5 minutes to have something a little bit more simplistic that I can grow out, even in my archive tier?
Yeah. Well, yeah, in short, the answer is yes, absolutely. What you're seeing is what we are seeing as well. So first of all, from scale up to scale out, that is what any conversation is all about at the moment.
Yeah,
So being able to have a modular approach to your capacity, but also, of course, to your compute, right? That is exactly what businesses are looking at the moment.
sure.
At the same time, vendor lock-in, I think that's a good example. You feel it. It's a need to be less reliant on one source of your infrastructure,
Yeah,
but being able to have the freedom to choose to work with different suppliers and vendors if needed. But it is in the end, it's about flexibility, right?
yeah,
That is what we're looking at: flexibility, scalability, and if you look at that from a timeline perspective, that you can also make decisions at the moment that you need to and be
yeah.
free to go to whatever technology or scale or capacity or partner you choose to work with. So what you're seeing is absolutely what we are seeing as well.
So it comes down to business agility as well. So having that capability, again, we're not saying tier one vendors aren't important. They absolutely are. And we look across the AI boom, the different workloads, and do you want an ultra fast NVMe that does all of the, number crunching when you're training the LM? But sometimes it's that ability to flex when you're at that archive layer or the mid tiers in it. I absolutely get it, and that's a really sobering piece. And again, as I say, we have a very open system with our Ceph-based system that allows huge millions of amounts of files, which kind of leads on really nicely as we talk about archive, as you would imagine, on this one, is that we're seeing a hybrid cloud approach as well from an archive long-term perspective. I know we've talked about, and hopefully we can touch on the Seagate cloud offerings that sit within there.
Yeah.
But we are seeing a massive growth in S3 based archives and capabilities within there. And we're very lucky to have our interface into the Seagate cloud. Again, it kind of goes back to what we're saying is, are you seeing the real depth, the sort of depth that's requirements coming from the customers saying, listen, I need an archive tier? Because if you think about the last time we ever looked at archives, backups, those sorts of things, something's gone wrong. Yeah. So
Yeah.
the blast radius is big. We need to get our data back. We need to maybe potentially pull that from the cloud. Tapes, whilst tapes are one of those ones that are still, and again, it's when I was a young lad, Vincent, it was one of the first things that I actually worked on was a big IBM tape things. And I remember thinking then, this will never, this is going to, as technology moves on, this will disappear. But tape is still there. And so for long-term archive, we're talking tens of years, actually fits perfectly. But when you need that data, are you seeing though that your customers are coming to you and being a little bit more pragmatic about it and saying, listen, we need to build out our archive tier, high density drive, all the good stuff we'll be talking about. But are you seeing that S3 capabilities up into the cloud, or are you seeing that the more niche MSPs that are coming in and saying, hey, listen, we have our own S3 type solution. We'd like to build something specific for our specific vertical or customer base. How are you seeing this evolution of archive? I think is the question I'm trying to ask you here.
Yeah, I think I used the word tier already a couple of times, and I think that's exactly what this is about. And we are not talking about storage anymore. We're talking about what purpose,
Yeah.
what are you trying to achieve here? Is it a backup layer, or is it maybe a hot data environment because of an AI workload that you want to run? Or are you keeping your data in a cold tier, not necessarily a cold tier on tape? Ideally not, because it's easier accessible from a hard drive than from a tape, but that's a different conversation. So absolutely, archiving is extremely important, not just to find a cost-effective location for all the data that you have created, but also to be compliant with regulation, right? We need to store data depending on the vertical you're working in. There's a retention policy, so make sure you put your data there, you meet your regulation requirements, and also immutability is very important from an archive standpoint. And of course, this is where the software meets hardware play is very important. And what policies are you going to put in place? So archive S3, whether it's in the cloud or it's on your own hardware on-prem, in both cases, I think it always starts with what problem am I trying to achieve and what is the best way to do that. From an archive perspective, meeting regulation, but also definitely looking at cost per terabyte. I mean, you don't want to have an archive that is expensive. Also, when do you move data into archive? I was reading an article recently that around 60% of business data is considered to be archival, but it actually still sits in a war material. So it's a very expensive alternative to archive if you keep it into a hot environment. So I know it's a long answer to your question, but I think we are definitely in a position where with the solutions that we have, being able to build in blocks or a modular approach, it's an excellent opportunity for your archival strategy in combination with the right software like euroNAS.
Well, I think it's what you're saying is that people now realise that, you know, and again, 44 terabytes, you know, that's huge. That's huge amounts of data. It's the blast radius that you could potentially have. And if we look at this in the negative, that something's gone wrong, and IT and software always goes wrong at some point. You have to factor that in. The old days of how cheap can I get my archive, put into tape, put it up in the cloud, do whatever we need to do, as opposed to how much downtime can I have from a business. So it's that risk mitigation that's becoming really important, and that flexibility. So the immutability around malware, because malware attacks are becoming very relevant right at this moment in time. The capability to scale becomes quite important. But how important is that data to you as a business asset? And it should be looked at as a business asset. Whenever I've dealt with our customer base, it's always your data is probably some of the most important parts of it, especially if you have multiple, like, you know, if you have multiple businesses or business units within there. Is what level of risk are you prepared to be exposed to? So having something like, again, enterprise level disk shelves that have the capability to have a singular file system, that S3 capability, that knowledge, you can then architect a solution that sits within there. And so again, the growth of the MSPs has been explosive. We're seeing explosive growth that sits within there because they're offering that unique, as you say, that warmish tier that has a fast capability to pull down. Really interesting time, which kind of moves into my next question really nicely, is that we're starting to see very open fast, and we alluded to that earlier. Now, our software is designed to run on any x86 based hardware. I think the days of the vendor lock-in, and this is again not a I don't think it's necessarily a Seagate question, it's more a trend. Okay, and what we're starting to see is a move towards repurposing and recycling what we currently have. So I'll give you an example of this, right? There was there's a local council here in the United Kingdom. It's the first time ever that I've seen a tender come out that talks about recycling their existing equipment. And by that is what upgrades can be done as opposed to buying new equipment. Yeah, how can I use my existing infrastructure to become part of, turn it into a storage node, for instance, or turn it in there? So is this something that you're seeing across Europe? And of course, I just think Seagate are perfectly balanced right now to be able to interconnect into this new move. And it's the right move, if I'm honest with you, because it's, in my case, I was really excited to see it. It's taxpayers' money, it's my money, you know, and if I can reuse, turn that into a storage node that I run Ceph over, for instance, all of a sudden, I've been enhanced. Is this something that Seagate's using? Your strategy is now becoming perfectly clear. You know, like you can see now with your Mosaic strategy where this all fits in. Is this a trend that you're seeing? Do you think that this is something that your customers are really excited about?
And I think that many customers have the assignment as well to make sure that existing infrastructure is kept as long as possible, and as long as it's meeting the service standards that have been set. So different generations of, and now I'm talking from a storage standpoint, of course, with different capacity points within a system, in a scale out environment is absolutely feasible and accepted and needed. So again, the answer is yes. That's what we're seeing as well. Yeah, we're building on what's already there. Yeah,
it's a really nice time to see, actually, because the rip and replace, that sort of tier one vendor model. Now I've got to be very careful because I come from a tier one background, but that rip and replace piece is actually starting to disappear away. And there's a whole load of good reasons to do that. Now I'm going to come to the end. It's been an absolute brilliant journey that we've gone through here. So when we're combining your high density platforms, and I think this is more a philosophical type question. So we've talked about this hybrid concept. We talked about the parts of the cloud that we can offer as our storage elements of it. Now, I really want to just really hone in on that. There's three steps that I see that sits within there. We have this really cool infrastructure that Seagate, and a very clear journey and trajectory for storage with Seagate. We have the capability to say to our customers, using euroNAS software, is hey, listen, look, if you want to repurpose what you have in a more environmentally friendly way, we can do that. But if you want to go new, and again, you can use a tier one vendor, you can use a HP, a Dell, or whoever you decide, or Lenovo, for instance, to run our software. And we now have that cloud element, that soft hands that kind of goes around it on there. How do you think? Or sorry, how do you think, but how are your customers taking this type of approach as opposed to a traditional monolithic, here's a storage array, here's some shelves, and you can go up to Azure if you want, or what's the actual, where are you seeing? Because you have a very defined path where we're going. You have obviously companies like euroNAS that give you the flexibility, and you have a really smart cloud offering that's now as part of that. How does that worry, scare, or actually excite your customer base over traditional monolithic, let's just buy 100 terabytes from here or 1,000 terabytes from there and try and bolt it all together in a traditional way?
Yeah. We're talking about data storage strategy. And that is exactly what businesses are working on right now, a strategy. How do I make sure I optimize what I have? I leverage the cloud. I'm not cloud only anymore. I'm looking at hybrid. And I think we read that in the press right now today. And I think this is here to stay. We are looking at hybrid environments where a cloud environment might even have a different role within the data storage strategy within an organization than the on-prem data storage does. Especially now also with AI, where you're also looking at a hotter tier. You spoke about NVMe. That's a different workload. And we had the conversations in the past, and I'm not talking longer than 2-3 years ago. Is our hard drives going to be out of the market soon because NVMe is coming up? Well, everybody now knows and recognizes that we are coexisting because we are addressing different workloads. That's why we still see tape, we see hard drives, and we see NVMe, and we see on-prem as well as we see cloud. So it all comes back to the strategy. How do you manage your data, and how do you manage it across different technologies, but also the different locations, on-prem and cloud? We have a live cloud environment. Live is the brand name of the product that we have brought to market about 3 years ago. So we have our own object storage in the cloud as a service. In addition to bringing systems to businesses for an on-prem use or in a co-location or in your own data center. So this hybrid approach is not only a concept, it's also something we bring to market with all the products that we have.
And I think that's absolutely brilliant. And having a team like yours that has the capability to bring all of these tendrils together and actually make it and help create, drive, and build that strategy for our customers, because sometimes it can be a bit of a minefield. But as ultimately, as you say, it's how do I build a mutability into this? If something goes down, what's the quickest way to get my systems back up and running? What's really important to me? What isn't important to me? And sometimes that differs across the marketplaces. If you're talking to a customer that's a financial trading house or a hospital that's running patient critical services, it's different. It's a different requirement. And having a team from someone like Seagate and potentially suppliers like us at euroNAS being able to actually bring that together as one, I think it's just it's a really great way to be. And it's choice. It's about choice. It's how can we bring your spend down? How can we increase that capacity? How can you meet your governmental requirements? Again, I'm going to leave you with this one. Is one of the customers I did speak to, they had 100-year retention time on some of their data. They did some research into some viral research. They had 100-year retention time on that. And they were saying that the research is so outdated now, but governmental pressures are saying it's got to be 100 years. So Vincent, listen, Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It's a great strategy from Seagate. It's a really good fit with euroNAS. I just think that the market is going in such a great trajectory that, you know, for us moving forward, it's going to be brilliant. And you know, it's been great to share your views and you know, your knowledge of the market with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time and the great preparation knowing the Seagate story.